So, warm greetings, good evening, and welcome to this Tuesday talk, Entering into Relationships of Happiness. So, such a beautiful title and an invitation. So, these talks are interactive in that you're very welcome to share any thoughts that come up, any questions in the chat. We have translation in Spanish. And also, you're very welcome to come into camera if you like. It's like we're as if meeting in a way, even virtually. And I was thinking today, when I was quite new to meditation, really envious of people I met who seem to have created harmony in their close relationships, friends, relatives. And I was thinking, this is not possible. But it's somehow very interesting, the connection between self-discovery and this riddle of relationships. So today we're going to be hearing from two experienced meditators. So I'll introduce now, first of all, Mary, who is joining us from Chicago, and she's been practicing for over 30 years, and she's coordinating activities in the Brahma Kumaris Center there in the Midwest. And we're also joined by Viggo, and his background is in IT. He also discovered Raj Yoga in the mid-80s, and he was involved with meditation center service in Romania, and now he is coordinating ARCAs in Denmark, so the center there. So it's really great to have you both with us. And we'll start with like hearing your initial thoughts, and after that, see a natural conversation, and also we'll have questions. So I don't know if we'll start with Mary. I think you were kind of the one behind this topic. So let's hear from you maybe. So I think good afternoon and warm welcome.
Thank you, Sarah. Really nice to be here with my Cambridge family today, and also to get to meet Viggo, who I haven't met before. I'm really looking forward to this. And I would say, hearkening back to your comment, Sarah, that when you first started meditating, you noticed that people who had been meditating for a while seemed to have harmonious relationships. And wouldn't that be nice? I think that's a thought that we all have. Wouldn't harmonious relationships be wonderful? When I started meditating, I think one of the main things that attracted me to Raja Yoga meditation was I learned I can actually have a relationship with God. I found that astounding, to be able to have a relationship with God. I understood I'm a point of light, God is a point of light, so why can we not have a relationship? And I tried to establish a relationship that way, point of light to point of light. But it was actually rather boring. And I thought, if I'm going to have a good relationship with God, there has to be more to it. And so I decided God was going to be my friend. And when I meditated, I would think about what I wanted God to say to me, and how I wanted God to see me, and how I wanted God to support me. And after a while, I thought, this relationship is a little lopsided. It's all about what God is doing, and there's nothing about what I'm doing. So I decided instead, let me be a good friend of God. Let me be God's best friend. And so I imagined how God's best friend would look at God and speak to God and support God and be with God. It was much better that way, actually. I was much happier. And so this was my first realization about relationships, that what I get out of the relationship depends on what I put in it. Now, we've all heard that. You get out of anything what you put into it. But in relationships, we tend to think about what we can gain. So I took this wonderful experience of being God's friend. It made me feel really noble. And then I applied that to all of my human relationships, and I realized that for a very long time I had been concerned about having good friends. And now I dropped that, and I said, instead, I want to be a good friend. Same old relationships with people I'd been in relationships for years. I never told anybody about this switch, but all my relationships became happier and lighter, and I felt more fulfilled. I felt more appreciated, simply because I had switched to how could I be a friend? And so, for the sake of this talk tonight, this conversation tonight, I thought I would take this one step further. We all know that we're not supposed to have expectations. Expectations are bad. But also it's very useful to have expectations, and we do it naturally. So just as an experiment, for the sake of this conversation, I asked myself, what is my expectation of myself in relationships? And let me experiment with that. And so I came up with 4 things. One is what I expect out of myself: to give regard to everyone. Now, normally we give regard to those who do good things, and we give disregard to those who do bad things. But we know as souls, as spiritual beings, that every soul is deserving of regard, simply because we're all children of God, and any child of God would be great. So to give regard, that was my first expectation for myself in all relationships, to give regard based on the value of that soul, with no focus on what people are doing or not doing. And that took a little shift inside me. The second expectation, there are 4 altogether. The second expectation of myself is to do what I say I'm going to do. Simply that. Instead of looking at other people, are you doing what I told you to do? Are you doing what I want you to do? Simply do what I say I'm going to do. That's a valuable ingredient of relationships. And then my third expectation of myself in relationships is to acknowledge other people's good qualities. Because it's very easy to just look at people's mistakes and faults and what they don't do well. But that obviously doesn't lead to happiness in relationships. So instead, I made a point to acknowledge people's good qualities. That was the third. And the fourth was to look for ways to cooperate with others. Because in this other mode, this mode of having friends or having relationships, I'm looking for people to cooperate with me. So just looking for really simple and manageable ways that I could cooperate with others. And so what I discovered was it's okay to have expectations for myself, because I can fulfill them. And when my expectations are fulfilled, then I have happiness.
It's a big area, isn't it? The expectations, because it's the negative premise as opposed to like a wish or a vision. So interesting to turn it on oneself, taking responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Very nice. So, okay, let's take this chance. We'll hear from Viggo, what comes up for you, and very warm welcome. Nice to be connected after some time.
Thank you, Sarah. Do you hear me clearly?
Yes, sound is very good.
Very good. Yeah, I was actually a bit inspired by the photo you showed initially during the meditation. I mean, this is sort of the image of the idyllic core family, and as we all know, families are far from that all the time. So I was just thinking to myself, if you look at your life, you will see that at least 25% of your life you are actually spending in a dependency as a child, as a youngster to your parents. And if you become a parent yourself later on, you will be dependent on your children. I mean, they are dependent on you, but you also clearly have a responsibility towards them. And so it adds up to maybe almost half of your life or even more that you are in a relationship that you, in a certain sense, haven't chosen yourself. Certainly not as a child. As a parent, yeah, to some extent. But once you give birth to a child, then you are sort of a bit locked and constrained in that relationship. So there are relationships that we cannot abandon or choose freely as such. They are pretty much given. And I mean, in the Brahma Kumaris, we are, apart from having this understanding of the soul, we also have an understanding of reincarnation, and that the soul goes, through a series of births, and with it, it takes its karma, the accumulation of the effect of all its actions throughout all its lives. So when we are born with a set of dispositions. So we have some you can say legacy, that spiritual legacy that we are carrying, and that is what we are basically investing, or these are like spiritual assets that we bring to the table when we are born, and that will determine our relationships. And the childhood is very much a relationship where we are completely 100% you can say determined. The childhood is 100% determined by those assets that I bring along, because the child has very little possibility to first of all choose another set of parents if it doesn't like the ones it got, or even influence their behavior and their influencing that relationship. And the child has very limited ability to modify its behavior. It's all controlled by sort of instincts, which are the effect of our past actions in the form of personality traits and tendencies and response behavior, all of that. So nonetheless, we are experiencing, both as children and as parents, we are experiencing a lot of joy and a lot of misery and agony as well in those relationships. They are the main relationships in our life. Parent, child, and partners. These are the core family relationships, and so they are very, very important to us, and it's very important that they are functioning well, and that we get the joy and happiness out of such relationships and not misery. And when it goes wrong, when there is a lot of pain and sorrow in relationships, the reason is usually always that we are bringing not the positive assets, the virtues, the good qualities with us, but on the contrary, we have a lot of bad dispositions that we are offering, and either as children or as parents. And that means that the quality of a relationship is something that we actually have to prepare over a long-term preparation, a long period of time. It's something we have to have in the back of our mind, that whatever I do, however I live my life, whatever values I live by, those are the ones that I will bring with me. They will determine my next life, my next childhood, and all my relationships. And I think relationships are sort of setups where we get all the you can say the happiness and unhappiness doubled in a relationship. So whatever is inside us will be doubled in a way. If we have what we would call spiritual purity in the sense of a detachment, a self-respect, a contentment, and a fulfillment within us, then that is what we will share with others in our relationships, and that is what we will experience from others in the same. So it's really an investment. It's a long-term investment, and it's probably, I see it as one of the most important objectives of our spiritual life, to sort of prepare ourselves for perfect relationships in the future, because we cannot influence them. We cannot sort of choose them when we are there. We have to do it now. And I think one very important thing to realize is also that we have happiness is a spiritual quality, just as love and contentment and freedom and purity and all of these, they have to be there inside me as a spiritual asset for me to experience it in a relationship. If it's not there, it will not come out and it will not be reflected. So if I'm not able to be happy and content when I'm alone in solitude, I will also not be able to do it in a relationship. And it's pretty much either there's nothing sort of extra that a relationship can give us. It just reflects whatever is inside us. And as Mary mentioned, whatever you give out, that's what you will reap. That's what you'll get back. So these were a few thoughts about long-term preparation and investment in relationships.
We thought you were in IT, but you're really in investments.
Yeah, this kind of investment, yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I like the way happiness is a spiritual quality. Actually, it made me think that word needs a little bit of defining, because then that sounds more like contentment and something higher. Whereas ordinarily happiness, it could mean excitement. And I think we get a lot of stimulation and sort of maybe excitement from being with people. But as you said, if we're empty inside without, then we don't bring a high quality. And Mary was touching on this about giving. So if I go into a relationship to give, I don't know if you want to say a bit more about that, Mary, and because I think without some understanding, then we can easily blame others for how we feel, especially parents, and that seem to have good reason for that. But actually, you mentioned taking responsibility, so I think that's very empowering, but it's also quite confrontational. So any thoughts that come up, or either on this or Viggo's sharing?
Yeah, I really like the point that Viggo made, that we have to invest in relationships. It's not that they're just going to work perfectly, and the investment has to be long-term. And I was thinking that, of course, I didn't invest in my relationships properly with my parents until I was middle-aged, and I started to realize, but it is possible. You can neglect a relationship like that for quite a long period of time, and then you can catch up and you can make it much better, as he said. But another part of relationships, I feel, is maintenance. And by maintenance, and I guess maintenance is kind of investing also, because when we get into relationships, especially important relationships, we have a lot of stories about the other person, and stories about ourselves also. So for example, I have stories about myself with my mother, and I have stories about myself with my father, and I have stories about myself with Sarah. And we then play these stories back in our mind, especially in important relationships. And if at some point in the relationship I don't get what I want, the soul gets hurt. And that's a big deal. So I'm going to make a big story about it, and I'm going to keep telling myself over and over and over. So one thing that I learned from Raja Yoga is that the person is not the story. Person has nothing to do with the story. The story is my creation, based on very limited information coming from my past. And so if I can just see the soul, I have to get rid of the story. I have to let go of the story. I have to acknowledge that the story is not the person. And whatever story I tell, even if I tell the story that Sarah is the most wonderful facilitator ever, at some point in the future, because that's the way I'm rating her, at some point in the future I will find a better facilitator, and I won't like Sarah as much. So we have to get rid of the stories because they're harmful. It's harmful to myself and it's harmful to Sarah. And it actually harms all of my relationships if I go around making up these stories. Now, of course, I can't help making up the stories, but then I let them go. And just see the soul, the point of light. This is what we understand, that there's a, from Raja Yoga, there's a soul inside. And the soul has a big story. The big story is we all came from God, and we all are in this journey, maybe a very long journey through life, perhaps after life on earth. And at some point, we're going to all go back. So if I can just see this big story, this is a soul, this is a spiritual being who came from God from another dimension. And this soul is in a body having a life. Isn't this interesting? Like we'd watch a movie. Now, this sounds very good. I'm going to give you another story from my own experiments. Last week, I had a meeting with a religious leader. And it was a meeting, the religious leader was very involved in interfaith activities. In fact, this religious leader was a scholar and who had studied religions a lot. How do we get people from all religions together? And so when we had this meeting, which was kind of a social meeting, this religious leader started talking about the wrong things that people in religion do that actually lead to damage. And he would know a lot on this topic because, as I said, he's a scholar. And so this was the topic that he kept coming back to over and over and over again. Now, there was a little voice inside me that wanted to criticize him, wanted me to judge him and say, no, interfaith leaders aren't supposed to talk about other religions this way. Little voice in my head wanted to do that. But because I was experimenting in relationships and I wanted to have a very good relationship with this soul, I said, no, you cannot allow that thought. Because if I would have allowed that thought, it would have turned into a criticism, and a whole tree would have grown from that criticism. And I would be thinking about this fault of this renowned spiritual leader probably all day long, and it would have ruined my relationship. But because I was practicing on expectations of myself, instead I said, let me find the good qualities in this soul, and that saved the relationship. I did not allow myself to tell a story. And I said, it's not my business to tell a story. I've only spent an hour with him. How can I suppose that I know anything about this soul in 1 hour? So instead, you know, we have this practice in Raja Yoga. When somebody insults you or gives you a hard time, you shower them with flowers. Now, it sounds kind of ridiculous in a way, showering them with flowers. Well, come on, you have to defend yourself. But I don't have to defend myself, because if I defend myself in words, or if I criticize another person, that's going to keep playing in my mind for a very long time, and I'm harming myself by doing that. So I just looked for his good qualities. And there were a couple of really, really good things. And I just said, let me just focus on these. And this will allow me to have a relationship with this soul, a good relationship with this soul. So now my relationship with that soul is I'm a well-wisher. That's another practice in Raja Yoga. Just be a well-wisher. It's easier on yourself that way. It's easier to maintain your own happiness that way. And as Viggo said, I have to create my own happiness, and then I can take that happiness into relationships. I can't expect other people to support my happiness.
Thoughts come up from Viggo on this. We do have a question, but if you have any response or anything to add on the subject.
Only that I think there are two different type of assets that are important for us. One is the purely spiritual ones, like happiness. I have to be internally happy. I need to have that resource within me, and that's a purely spiritual one. It comes from the soul. It's an eternal quality of the soul. It's not something we acquire. It's something we already have within us. And as the soul gets purified through the practice of yoga, of meditation, that will come out together with the contentment, the fulfillment, and not the least, the self-respect. I think there's nothing more detrimental, nothing more harmful in a relationship than low self-respect. You will simply ruin relationships. So, I mean, Mary was talking about showing respect to others, but we shouldn't neglect the importance of self-respect as a, you can say, quality. It is also part of our eternal quality, spiritual quality, love, self-respect, and contentment, fulfillment. If I have that, I don't need much more really, because I will tend to be naturally virtuous if I have these qualities. But then I also think on top of that, there are a lot of virtues which we can add. We can sort of, it's like colors we can add to our personality, and which will provide a lot of happiness and joy to other people, whether we are children or adults. And just like the low self-respect, I think the ego is probably one of the biggest single causes of bad personality traits which harm others. And if I am very stubborn or very dominating or controlling, it will also simply destroy my relationships. So these are sort of virtues I can work with, and I can develop, and I can evolve in myself. And again, if it becomes part of my nature to be humble and sweet and kind and gentle, that will go into my DNA, so to speak, my spiritual DNA. I will bring it with me, and that will be, I will be sweet as a child, as they say. Children can be very sometimes very naughty and very troublesome, and they don't always give that much happiness. So I should have as an aim, to become the most wonderful of all children, and the most wonderful parent, and the most wonderful partner. But that's not something that comes without a lot of effort and a lot of introspection and checking and changing.
Yeah, it's how much when Mary was talking about the story, and how much normally our affection is conditional upon that. And if it is, then we're in that sort of slave mindset. And I guess that really is the ego, isn't it, that is being created in confusion, where we have this limited understanding or false understanding of the self. And so we naturally can't help, as you were mentioning, that negative personality of clinging, but also trying to dominate or manipulate. So it all comes from not being full in that self-respect. So that helps to identify it. Just one question coming back to what was mentioned earlier. Neither of you feel free to answer it. Question is, why do I need to invest in long-term self-development and future relationships if I don't remember myself from this longer journey? And if we have the concept of reincarnation, some on the call might not, but it was mentioned previous births. Because on this longer journey, we might not remember. Maybe we are a different person, as if. So I don't know if either of you want to.
Yeah, you will not remember your past birth, but you are still under the influence of it. The way you lived your lives will have left a trace in the soul in the form of tendencies and not directly habits, because habits are the result of actions in this life, but you will have some tendencies and personality traits that have been founded in previous lives. And those you will not leave behind, those you will take with you. And they will become your sort of second nature when you are born. I mean, we have our eternal spiritual nature, but then we have this second acquired nature, which is in a way always under transition, but it is mostly influenced by our past life. And that will determine our relationships. This is what will determine how I will be as a human being. And then I can, not as a child, but as an adult, I can sort of adjust it. I can become aware of my tendencies. I can sort of gradually try to change my personality, but that's something that will only be possible in my adult life. In my childhood, I don't have that freedom, that possibility. I will be completely constrained by my what we call sanskaras, but you can call it tendencies, or my spiritual legacy.
Very nice, thank you. And if Mary would like to add anything on this.
Well, I can appreciate the question because, as Viggo said, it takes a lot of investment. Investment isn't a short-term thing. But I think the payoff, the reason that we would want to make the investment is because of freedom. Just to be, if I want to be free from influences that I'm not even aware of, I have to notice how I'm being influenced. Doesn't mean I have to go through psychoanalysis or anything, but I have to observe myself in relationships, see how my buttons are getting pushed. And that means there's some kind of influence there, because in the natural state of the soul, there aren't any buttons like that. There's nothing to be pushed. But we acquire this. And so if I can kind of be a scientist or be an investigator or a detective and see what pushes my buttons, notice, especially if I'm getting upset about something and nobody else seems to mind, that's kind of a clue. It's not what's happening, but there's some kind of influence inside of me. And then it's very easy to say, well, it's my mother, it's my father, it's my upbringing. But as Viggo suggested, it could go back even farther than that. It's possible. It could go back even farther than that. And even if it was my mother or my father, blaming my mother or father isn't going to make me feel any better. So I have to take responsibility that at some level, whatever happened to me, somehow I created, willingly or unwillingly, wittingly or unwittingly. And then as a spiritual being with a good intellect and good experience in life and good virtues and the ability to learn, let me just see what these was pulling my trigger and then pushing the buttons in me, and then that's where I can apply my spiritual power. And if we have a relationship with the Supreme Soul or the Source, that would be a good time to kind of draw extra power, because if we believe that there is a supreme good, then that good would definitely help us when we're trying to be better. So to put my attention there and see what happens then. Maybe I'll get a little freer. Maybe I'll get a little happier.
It's very practical, using situations in the present, and definitely the word freedom is a big one here, and I think for many. And it's interesting to see how the spiritual model is different from psychology, isn't it? Where it's trying to explain everything from the first, I think it's maybe 7 years of one's life, like attributing everything to our environment and upbringing, but actually spiritual model is pertaining something behind that. So that's also something maybe worth studying and understanding. This question came, and either of you, if you would like to share, what is the best practice to love without attachment in family relationships? Because attachment is overwhelming, especially with your offspring and your parents. I think Viggo, you mentioned it earlier about that's the often intense relationships we have.
I have no family as such. I mean, no children, no partner. So if Mary has, I will let her answer.
I don't, but I have a lot of siblings, and I can answer, I think. I can try. I will say what I've observed, because most of the people I'm around are in families. And I would say that it's really a high level of attainment that you're asking for in those family relationships, to not have any attachment or any dependency. And so let's say you want to be the best tennis player in the world. You give it your best, and you might get there someday. You might be number 2 or you might be number 4, but that's still a great accomplishment. So I think if we say I can't have any dependency or I can't have any attachment, that can cause a little bit of stress. But what we can do is say, definitely I love my family, but can I sort out, kind of separate the love from the attachment? Because we want to definitely keep the love, but the attachment inhibits our ability to increase the love, or to experience their love, or to love them fully the way that we would really like to. And for me, with my family, I went through a period of wanting to completely detach from my parents, because I had my issues with my parents. I knew that they were intellectually, I knew they were really good. They did the best that they could. They did a phenomenal job, but I still had my issues. And so when I meditated in the morning, I would just give respect and regard, respect and regard. Just see them as souls, in that paradigm that I'm a soul, an eternal spiritual being. And these are 2 souls also, eternal spiritual being. I tried to see them without the body, and just give respect and regard, respect and regard. And that's all I did. And the issues went away. And I knew that they were gone when for both of them, at the end of their life, I noted, I have 5 siblings, and I noted that my siblings were having issues that had been unresolved. And I didn't have any issues. I was just there with them, being with them in this important time of their life, supporting them however I could, congratulating them, knowing that it's really wonderful. They're graduating, they're moving on. Of course, I had, I was going to miss them, but I didn't have any issues left. So I think we have to separate the body and the soul, not all the time, because then when your child comes home from school, you want to hug the child and say, "How was your day?" and give the child a big smile. But also we have to have this ability at certain times to separate them, so that we understand this is a spiritual being in this body, and there's 2 things going on. One is there's the relationship there's all the family relationships, and the other thing is we all belong to God.
Yeah, very nice. Viggo, I think that
Yeah,
might trigger something.
I can add a bit. I mean, connected to this whole topic is the question of karma, as I also touched a bit on, and I think that's probably a whole program in itself, a whole topic in itself. The karma philosophy and how we can avoid to entangle ourselves in karmic bondages, because that's pretty much the reason why our relationships go wrong. And we get entangled in karmic accounts, and that is usually because we are crossing certain boundaries, certain lines that we shouldn't cross. We interfere with other people's business where we actually shouldn't. And so it's a very, very fine line and a very fine sort of art to know exactly when you should interfere, when you should sort of engage, and when you should disengage or sort of step back. And that's it's not something you can really understand theoretically. You have to experiment with it. You have to sort of see how it works and really feel it. You know, have some hands-on experience to really understand what it means to be detached. It's the most, probably one of the spiritual terms that is most difficult to understand, detachment, because it's so often connected or associated with or interpreted as coldness or distance, you know. But it really isn't. You can have very, very nice and very, I would say, even nicer and more smoother relationships with people if you are not too much entangled with them. And even with your close family, it can be like that. And it comes a bit back to what Mary mentioned initially, or the story about the interfaith leader, that you even keeping yourself clean of any negative thoughts or prejudices and all of that. That is also a sort of detachment. You're not mentally engaging or entangling yourself with other people's personality. Always have that sound distance, a buffer, so to speak, to other people. It's perfectly possible to combine it with a loving relationship. They're not in any way contradictory.
This word entangled is really vivid, isn't it? And actually reminded me with one close relative. I realized the best thing I could do is to not think about the situation and just step back and let things play out. And that was a contribution, but in the past I would have jumped in there to try to fix. So really interesting that you mentioned when to step back, when to. Do you have any thoughts, Mary, that come up from your experiences?
Well, I would say with my family, as I mentioned, I have 5 siblings, and most of them don't really agree with my life choices. I'm living in a meditation center. I dedicated myself to spiritual study. I did not get married. I don't have children. I don't go to restaurants. And they, they're uncomfortable. Let's put it that way. They're uncomfortable with my lifestyle. So when I first chose this lifestyle for myself with great happiness, I thought my family should support me. And I was very upset with them that they didn't support me. And I called them all kinds of names, narrow-minded, etc., because they wouldn't support me. But that was coming out of my old karma, as Viggo said, my old karma, my old way of relating with them. All of my life before being a meditator was that I never realized how much I depended on my family to support me. But the thing is, I never did what they wanted me to do to get support. I was out there doing something extremely different from everybody else. And then I said, okay, support me. So it was my karma. Of course they're not going to support me because of the history that I've had with them. It took me quite a while to understand this. But again, now I'm totally okay with them the way that they are. You know, they're living their lives according to their principles. Whatever they think of me, that's their own business. But what they really believe is what they see. And so if they can see in me that I, as Viggo said, I have self-respect based on being happy with my life choices, living according to my own values. I'm big enough so that I can accept them as they are and not get upset by what they're doing. Then I don't get entangled anymore. But I had been very, very entangled with this group of souls for a long period of time. So it took some years in order for me to disentangle.
It feels like acceptance is the key to come out of this.
Yeah. And why? I mean, it's insane not to accept what is, but still, we think it could be better.
Someone is asking if they missed something at the beginning. What was your first expectation of yourself? You were talking about having expectations on yourself is okay, I think.
Oh, right. The first one was to give regard to everyone on the basis of their spiritual identity, that they're souls, they're children of God.
Mm. So you mentioned the word God, and it's like I remember when I first came across the teachings, I probably could have run out the door. So I wasn't really looking. I didn't think I was, but it's the spirituality understanding is so different, isn't it? So that took I could sense it through the way that it was being delivered, and in the reading somehow it was speaking to the soul rather than to the role. But I think that might take time, and I wonder if some might feel I don't believe in God, and so is it something I have to imagine? But yeah, I don't know if either of you want to share anything.
Yeah, I mean, that was my experience. I was not looking for God. Actually, I wasn't looking for anything. I thought my dysfunctional life was very good. But, you know, it came to me. Spirituality came to me. And so I use the word God because it's a word that everybody knows. But the important thing is that any relationship has to be authentic, and this relationship in particular. So if somebody doesn't have an inclination towards God, we all have an idea of good. And some people nowadays use the word source, meaning the source of all goodness. Whatever that is for you, whatever brings out the best in me, whatever helps me see myself as fundamentally good. My experience when I started meditating was I had an experience of God. And so because I had that experience, then I believed in God. But I think whatever we believe, whatever path we take, has to be based on our experiences. But I would definitely recommend the path of Raja Yoga because it does give an opportunity to explore the existence of God.
Very nice. Yeah, thank you for sharing your experiences. Yeah, I think it's the foundation, isn't it? That whatever we have confidence, and we can build. Viggo, I think something you said earlier, someone has typed, so the happiness is inside us, not outside in situations or people. So it's a comment, but I don't know if you want to share more about that. It feels actually very profound because we're so used to, and even knowing it, we might still be trying to get that from others, and that feels like a key from what you were saying earlier. Relationships, it should be I'm in my self-respect and giving. But if any other thoughts come on this subject.
Yeah, I mean, we in relationships we are. I mean, why do we seek relationships? Why are they so important in our life? It's because we that's where we experience the greatest joys if they are functioning well. If you know, if we are with very nice, virtuous people, it gives a lot of happiness. But again, if I don't have that source of happiness inside me, if it's somehow blocked, you know, sometimes the flow of love, or as I mentioned before, the self-respect, if that is has been harmed, and I have a very low self-respect, it will also block and inhibit my ability to appreciate and accept love and happiness from others. So it's pretty much a two-way flow. But I mean, I see the world and my relationships from my perspective, and if I want to change the quality of those, I have to do that work on myself and make sure that I'm actually contributing with something. You know, I cannot go into any sort of relationship or even a business or, you know, any partnership with nothing. I mean, I have to contribute with something. I have to put something on the table, and then according to, you know, my offering, I will get something that matches that. And it's, I mean, I know it sounds a bit profane, but it's actually how it works, isn't it? Also in relationships. And that's how the karma law works. I mean, it always tries to balance out things. You know, if you have that quality in you as a soul, then you will get like, you know, you will get relationships that are sort of matching or mirroring that quality, souls that are alike. And so it is very, very much a question of developing these resources within myself, and that is why we need God, because I don't think we can actually do that job without. There is a basic deficiency in most souls, especially if they're a bit you know, older. They will have a spiritual deficiency. They will have a depletion of spiritual qualities, and this has to be replenished by some source, and that source is, according to our understanding, exactly what God is: the resource, the reservoir of spiritual qualities, which we can connect to, and we can tap into, and we can fill ourselves from. And that's that becomes then the foundation of all our relationships, plus a lot of other things, all our talents and creativity and powers, and, you know, any asset we can think of, it comes from that spiritual source. So it's immensely important. And it has a very long-term impact. You know, it's like anything else I can think of that I have accumulated in this life, whether it is material or immaterial achievements. You know, it can be, you know, material possessions. Obviously, I'm going to leave behind, but even my, you know, my merits and credits and name and fame and all of that, I will also leave behind. It's all limited, confined to this life. But any spiritual quality, any value that I embody as a virtue, as a power, as a principle, that's going to follow me, and it's going to follow me for many births. So that's why it is. This is where our main focus should be, really. And then as we say, you know, everything else should follow us like a shadow. We shouldn't run after anything, because it will follow us naturally as a shadow.
It's interesting how you're bringing it back to a broad view every time, and so getting the feeling of that. It feels like, I guess, relationships and love is beyond limits, as you were saying, and beyond fear of loss also, in a sense. This comes from security, and so I guess this union with at the spiritual level, with a supreme friend, or whatever the name, it's when we can be free from that fear, because it transcends this, you know, this physical limited role, which has some kind of end. But of course, as you both said, it requires like little study, it requires orientation. So it's like teaser to what is this. It's very interesting. We've had a question come in. I know we're kind of coming to time, but perhaps we may be able to have a look before we round up. What about people who are poor and exploited by power structures, even in the UK, and who struggle to be happy because of unfair circumstances? Maybe like a corrupt society, they become victims, have a lot of stress with just surviving. I don't know if you get the feeling of the question.
Sure. Well, I'm not really sure our external and material conditions are so important when it comes to these matters. I think it's much more important how I respond to them. And if you are content, spiritually content, it's unconditional. It doesn't in any way depend on external circumstances, situations. You can have very little, and still, if you have the ability to emerge that sense of contentment within you, and it's so much connected with peace, I think, then you will experience it in all circumstances, and you will know. You will also have that understanding, that spiritual understanding, that any life situation you are finding yourself in is limited. I mean, it's time limited. It's not going to last forever. At some point, that karma is sort of settled, and you will be free. And then, again, at least from your next birth, you will have changed everything. And according to what you bring with you, according to your spiritual assets, your next birth will be accordingly. And so again, I think our focus should be on spiritual accumulation, spiritual growth, more than anything else. And we will reap the fruits already in this life. It's not that we have to wait for our next life, but it's a long-term effort, and we have to be patient. And there'll be a lot of achievements in this life as well. I mean, you will feel that you are getting disentangled. You're getting more and more free, more and more content. Your relationships are becoming more and more easy. That's a reality that happens over time, and that is a success. I mean, that's the greatest success you can have, and all the rest is really immaterial. I think we shouldn't run after name, fame, wealth, all of that. And
it's very liberating that this is independent of the physical, but I can understand when, often mind can be quite obsessed if we're feeling, say, financially insecure. But as you say, I mean, what I found practical as well, even if it's a minute or two of quality attention in this, in a meditation study, then I can continue with the role I need to play, but it doesn't have to be from that sort of victim space. And so we do have choices. It's like in parallel, maybe.
but even the sense of insecurity, what is it? It's a lack of basically of security, and that is also a spiritual asset. Contentment and security both come from peace, and so that means that you can feel completely secure even though you are in a very shaky, maybe material situation, and have very little to do with, but you still can feel totally secure and have faith in your destiny, and because it's that sense of insecurity is something that comes from within it. I don't believe that it has so much to do with your external situation. People who are insecure are typically notoriously insecure. I mean, they will be insecure all the time, and it cannot be in any way repaired or remedied by any sort of external you can say security, or what's the word I'm looking for? structure, or it is like with the other qualities. If I don't feel love and self-respect and all of that in the first place, then nothing can give it to me. And I mean, obviously, no one can give me self-respect. That's something I have to develop. And again, if I don't have the ability to love, if that flow is blocked within me, I will not be able to accept the love from others. It will simply not happen. That's the most frustrating and the most agonizing situation in a relationship. When you have people who try to give you love and you are not able to accept it or take it. That's it sort of doubles up your sorrow. So all these issues we have to sort out, and then we can realize perfect relationships. That will come by itself.
Yeah, automatic. I'll just read one statement, then we'll like to hear from Mary, and also if you'd like to share some meditation at the end. But this someone just commented, with family, they found there was some resentments, but they were only noticed once they started to go down the spiritual route and look closely at themselves, but now able to deal with those, because otherwise he realized they would block progress. So it's interesting. We might not even see it. We just have these emotions maybe, but can identify it, and then we have choice. Thank you for sharing that experience. So Mary, it'd be lovely to hear what's come up from you in the last kind of topic. And also if you're happy just to share perhaps, 2-3 minutes of some reflection, that would be okay.
Okay. I guess one thing that came up for me was that, as Viggo said, this joy is a natural quality of the soul. But when we enter into relationships, we want someone else to activate that within us. We want to experience it. And I have a relationship with another person so that person can activate the joy within me because I forgot how to do it. But it's better to put in the effort to find that place of joy within myself and activate it all the time. See myself as a joyful being and practice that. And then I can bring that joy into relationships rather than wanting you to activate my joy. You might have worked hard all day long and you're tired and you can't deal with my confusion. And so if I can see that, especially in important relationships, I see others in terms of their relationship with me, my family member, my team member, my fellow meditator. But we also know that every soul has a unique part to play in this big story of life. And sometimes the ones who are villains, we think are the villains, they actually turn around and become the heroes. And so we don't want to label people. And it's really easy to label people because there are a lot of people who are in the news who are portrayed as villains. And they may do bad things, but nevertheless, when we label them, we are inhibiting their ability to change. So we should never underestimate someone's power to change, but instead give positive energy. This is a form of relationship, even with people I don't know. And also people I do know. Sometimes there's a scapegoat in the family. Don't talk with your other family members about that person, but give them positive energy to change. Recognize that every soul has the ability to be good, but we all are weak in certain ways, and so we need a little bit of an impetus. We need a little extra power. So
Very practical. Thank you. Yeah, that's true. And like gossiping, and it's like subtly very disempowering. So taking that responsibility again to empower and also see the bigger picture, the the larger map and the different roles. So
Mm.
thank you for that too. Yeah.
So a little reflection now. All right. Come into your inner place of silence. We've had a lot of conversation, a lot of topics, but deep inside the center of the self is silence. And in this place of silence, we know all the answers, because the answers come from our fundamental goodness. We souls are divine beings. And however you understand the greatest good or divinity or perfection, however you understand that to be, that's your connection with that source of power. And consider the possibility that you are where you are in order to enter into relationships of happiness. It's that simple. It looks really complicated, but maybe it's just about relationships of happiness. Find that place of happiness within yourself and activate that place. And then share that energy with others. See yourself with an eternal connection with the source of goodness. It's a spiritual connection, so it's not so obvious, but it's always there. Open yourself to your highest good. It may be much higher than you think. Open yourself to the source of goodness. And enjoy the happiness that comes from seeing goodness in others. Om Shanti.
Thank you. Thank you so much to Mary and Viggo. I'm left with a feeling of like excitement in a sort of a happy way. So many avenues to understand and explore, and this feeling of happiness being something like more a constant friend, and it's like a sharing. So really enjoyed this chance to share this space, and thanks to everyone for creating this, sharing your presence and your questions and thoughts. If you're in a position to come into camera, do feel free to give a wave. It's always nice to see you, and also those listening to recording, I'm sure will really enjoy. Thank you both.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, everyone. It was very nice. Really nice conversation.
Yes. And thank you, both of you and everyone joining. It's a wonderful topic, and it's a great fortune to be able to participate in this.
Appreciation. We're just going to pop in the chat. If you're intrigued about the courses, if you're not already reflecting on the teachings of Raj Yoga, then opportunity to join the ongoing ones from Cambridge. But of course, they're being run from many centers, so you might have a local one or different online options. And also the talk recording will be posted on our YouTube page. So nice comments. Thank you for sharing your efforts, inspiring energy and words. So until we meet again, enjoy these relationships and continue to inspire. So see you soon.
Take care.
Bye bye.